Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we are back to video game news. Boy, do I sound echoey today, and something is weird about Windows Calendar. It feels like too, like they've changed how it labels the day. Regardless, it's Monday, February 9th, and even though I've been talking about, we'll scroll down the 24-hour peak concurrent chart here, needing to do taxes pretty soon. I really hadn't run the numbers, ironically, as far as just seeing how many days really are left until April 15th. If it's February 9th, that's basically a month, and maybe you would say 6 days if you're going to push it to the very last second. So yeah. So while I have been making decent amounts of progress cleaning and decluttering, to the point where honestly I might hit a point where I've got as much done as I possibly can do, and then I'll just have some remodeling stuff that I'll need to get done, and if I don't get that done, then I'm just stuck at that spot. And since I can't really do that myself, that is probably going to be the point where I would start to think about doing some other projects. Weirdly though, none of this is moving me very quickly towards getting back to playing any video games. So I am in an interesting kind of like vacation mode, where it's not really a vacation, it's just real world stuff has to be focused on more. I'm also going to end up probably taking a bathroom break pretty quickly here on this stream. Yeah, my taxes are going to be a little bit different this year compared to previous years, so I am potentially going to actually end up owing some, which sucks, certainly, but it's fairly hard to avoid that. We did find out that looking at the most wishlisted by the change in followers on this chart is an interesting, different perspective. So I'll want to do that also. But unfortunately, I think I am going to just immediately have to take a bathroom break. I might as well have not started in the first place. Not the shift in followers, but maybe the 7-day gain is the more perspective one. Alright, well, apologies. I'll have to take a break immediately here, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. One of the things about Yu-Gi-Oh! While it's playing during these breaks is that I looked at the new video that they were advertising in the solo mode, and yeah, it is animations. I don't know how long they are, but you also have to duel in between them, so you're still not really going to be in much of a position if you just wanted to watch the video and get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! If you've fallen out of favor with it like I have. Although I am definitely not looking to get back to playing any kind of collectible card game these days, as they take way too much time. So we were trying out the new concept of looking at the 7-day gain on the most wish list games, and that gives me potentially a better idea of what is building up in excitement. For example, Poker Night at the Inventory being re-released. I'm not sure if I even really want to call it a remaster, is a big ticket item, but it's not at the #1 spot or even the top 100 spot, as it was just announced a couple days ago. But yeah, you can see that the number of new wish lists has gone up, whereas Mugenics is much closer to its release date, and as such it is potentially gaining more and more followers, wishlisters. Edgar Allan Poe's Interactive Horror 1995 edition. Interesting. Haven't heard anything about that. In fact, as one thing that is intriguing about looking at this chart, I've realized is that it does happen to be one of the few possible locations where I'll see new games and new information about new games versus so many other lists that really are just showing people playing old games or playing the same old. Darksiders 4 has gained something. I wonder when that page went up, and I wonder if there has been any new announcement for Darksiders 4. It's kind of the case that I'm going to begrudgingly play Darksiders 4 and finish that long-running series that, frankly, when all is said and done, is just not going to live up to my expectations and what I wish it would have been. And yeah, Darksiders 1 is really the only really good Darksiders game, and then 2 is alright, 3 is pretty bad. The spin-off game is, I think, kind of bad, but I haven't played it, so I don't know. What's funny here is they're saying it continues in Darksiders 4 when it should say concludes, because there's really no good reason why there should be a Darksiders 5. It's taken Gunfire Games over a decade, probably closer to 2, to get to this point. And they had this whole idea of, in particular, just making slightly different style of games for each of the sequels, which is frankly just crazy. It's probably one of the best examples of the creators getting their way a little too much, and then the capitalists and the publishers, in this case THQ Nordic, previously for the first game it was just actual THQ, before it went out of business. Yeah, generally the publishers would have put their foot down and said, no, we had a successful recipe with Darksiders 1, let's just make 3 more games in that recipe. And yes, you could have changed a little bit, but the Zelda Ocarina of Time experience the Darksiders 1 offered was not improved upon at all with any of the sequels. Yeah. Let's move forward and try and go through the stream fairly quickly. Yeah. It is possible that I'll get to Texas done over the course of just one day, but I do need to focus on that and kind of slow down doing anything else. Yeah. Let's see, is there anything going on? Well, I did find out that smart Tuya devices, if they are Wi-Fi and Zigbee, they can't be grouped together, which seems fairly reasonable to have assumed that that would have been the case. So I have to make two groups as I am trying to move more bulbs to being Zigbee, and hopefully my Zigbee hub can handle more devices and my Wi-Fi can lose some connections so that it can have more bandwidth too. And I'll have the bandwidth there, maybe more CPU bandwidth to handle different numbers of devices, higher numbers of devices than it is even the Wi-Fi frequency bandwidth issue. I saw a YouTube video talking about Wi-Fi 7 and how basically nothing that is being advertised as a Wi-Fi 7 router right now has all the features that Wi-Fi 7 is supposed to have. That was the problem with Wi-Fi 6 too. That's why they came out with Wi-Fi 6E, and honestly I don't even know if you're guaranteed to get all the features of Wi-Fi 6 if you get a Wi-Fi 6E router. Really, you probably are better off staying at a decent Wi-Fi 6E router if you're buying something brand new, and you could probably live with a Wi-Fi 5 because the vast majority of devices you're going to have are not going to support any of those new features anyways. So yeah, until you start seeing it in a lot of devices, and the Tuya smart devices are incredibly old. Like, only a couple weeks ago did Expressive, the maker of the ESP32 chip, which is in most Tuya smart devices, come out with something that could actually work at 5 gigahertz. And so that new chip is exciting, but it won't be seen in devices probably for a year to possibly 3 or 4 years. Meanwhile, I've saw a YouTuber straight up say that they don't think Thread is a good connectivity protocol, which sucks because on paper it sounded like it was a really good connectivity protocol, but the difference between implementation and on paper can be vastly different, certainly. So I am still very much leaning towards Zigbee where I can get it. However, I got a bird feeder with a camera in it, and anything with a camera in it is going to be Wi-Fi and not Zigbee. It seems like the bird feeder is going to work out just fine. It has the ability to play a sound of a dog or a siren or a eagle if it sees cats or squirrels or things. Right now I have it on the ground or on a step outside. I wanted to test the Wi-Fi distance and connectivity since it was fairly far away before I had somebody decide to mount it on the wall. And yeah, I'm a little surprised that it's actually perfectly fine at that distance. So yeah, it has a decent amount of features. It's not anything super fancy, but I figured for a couple days while I'm testing it, I might have it bark like a dog at all the cats and the one possum at least that is living in my backyard. Maybe scare them away. Although the eagle sound effect did not scare them away at all. But yeah, I imagine these animals are probably smart enough to go, hey, that's just a speaker playing a sound effect. It can't really hurt me. And the bird feeder has a little spring thing on it so that if a squirrel tried to get up there and eat the bird feed, it would close a little piece of metal over the opening where the bird feed is, so it's weight based, which is a interesting old school setup. I also found out that if you have several bulbs on the same light switch, mixing the light bulbs between Wi-Fi bulbs and Zigbee bulbs is not smart, because the Zigbee bulbs I got require you to flip the switch on and off 6 times to reset it and reconnect if necessary, whereas the Wi-Fi bulbs only require you to flip the switch 2 times. 6 times is much smarter, because there have been many times where my Wi-Fi bulbs have lost connectivity just because of the power flickering on and off during a power storm or just a bad electricity event. Whereas the odds of getting the timing right to flip the lights exactly 6 times accidentally is pretty impossible. So that's another win for Zigbee bulbs over Wi-Fi bulbs. I just received my infrared bathroom heater. I may try and install that fairly quickly to make sure that works. So yeah, I'm just adding more and more smart devices. I installed a smart lock on one door, and it seems like it works. Second time. First one I got was broken, but the second one, being Bluetooth, does have a weirdness in that it beeps just kind of randomly whenever anything connects to it, which might be a security thing, but also I think it might kind of suck. And yeah, the smart doors in general don't quite have exactly what I'd want for them to have, which would be an extra sensor to indicate when the door was opened by anyways, including being kicked down. They can only indicate when the handle itself is unlocked, which means if you're leaving the room, it won't trigger any kind of function. But then I really don't know what the functions it would should trigger anyways. Like the reality is I got the smart handles because they were handles instead of knobs, more than I got them for being smart. Smart is just a extra for $30 handles. Yeah, they don't have seemingly a bathroom mode option either, where you would have to put your thumb on the thumb scanner to unlock the door, but any scan would be accepted. Yeah, which would be nice if there was a mode like that, like something that would generally say, hey, this door is locked, so people won't accidentally walk in, but if an emergency happens, somebody slips and falls in the shower or something, you could still get in. Or Yeah. But yeah, it's fairly common for people to see a closed door in a bathroom and not make the default assumption that someone is in there. Yeah. See, am I doing anything else as far as smart devices these days? Not really. Not any I can think of. I did order Paranoia Agent, an anime TV series. Kind of hard to see. Series. It aired like once on Toonami and then never again, as far as I could tell. And apparently it was on sale, and enough people ordered it that twice now Amazon has asked me, "Are you sure you really want to get this because it's been delayed?" I'm like, "Why do you keep asking me?" I'm pretty sure the reason they keep asking me is because they don't have any more in stock. But yeah, I'm hoping I'll get it, but I imagine there's a small chance that it will just get canceled. Still trying to make little bits of progress here and there in Pokemon TCG Pocket. There's not anything really new going on there. Had to make a deck just to achieve some of the solo quests. Still playing Memento Mori. I missed a day playing Memento Mori as far as the dailies. Not a big deal, but it sucks. You want to, on those kinds of gacha games, do the dailies every single day. Same is true for Pokemon TCG Pocket. But yeah, Memento Mori, I think, cycled out a little bit of some of the characters, but for at least one of my two accounts, I may already still have most of the things already unlocked, most of the gacha characters. This chart feels like it's getting longer, but the number of service ends seems to be changing month to month, which would definitely make me assume that at the end of each month that there's a service end, they don't include it on the chart the next month, because obviously the income would be 0. And then there's a bunch of new things that launch, maybe several of which that fail within the first couple of months. Yeah, I still wish I had a better way to know if there were any other kinds of non-gacha games that were making any levels of success at all on mobile, but with the exception of Fortnite, which noticeably is not a gacha game, I would suspect there really aren't that many other games that are successful. I really don't have anything to say about hardware at the moment, with the new delays in everything and the RAM shortage. Hardware as a topic of conversation has become pretty mute. And yeah, haven't been playing any games lately. Looks like we've got a 2K publisher sale, which, man, they probably are pretty desperate to try to sell a few more copies of Borderlands 4. Yeah. Mega Bonk still seems to be a major success. I don't know if anything special or new is happening on Elder Scrolls Online, but I guess that's probably where you would have to say the real fandom of Elder Scrolls must have been pushed to. The Sims franchise sales up to 75% off. Arguably, you're never really going to get a great discount on The Sims. Then you have a game that's See, this came out in August of 2025, so it's not quite a year old. Down to $40. Now, if I recall correctly, there's nothing super wrong with Mafia the Old Country, just not really anything amazing either about it, which is what you could probably say for practically every game that came out last year. Steam Deck is still somehow a top seller at full price, with Counter-Strike 2 being free, being a top seller always, and Helldivers, Arc Raiders, Fallout 76, Marvel Rivals still staying up there. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 free games versus 1, 2, 3, 4 actual games and 1 piece of hardware. That probably speaks a lot to the economy. Certainly that there is just not that many paid games being bought these days. I don't recognize any of these games with the exception of Eugenics as far as popular upcoming ones. Romeo's a Dead Man, I guess I recognize that one too. And Reloaded, now that I think about it. But still, there's quite a few I don't recognize. Yep. Claire Obscure making the specials list. Trending free, or a lot of demos. I wonder how important it really is to get your game to be a trending free game, or your demo of your game to be a trending free thing. It probably would help you quite a bit. Right, let's move on. There's really no reason to drag this out. Yeah, you see this sale as far as the Sims go, and it's just a ton of DLC that even if it's 50% off, you're still paying $10 for a bit of DLC, where I don't even know where the starting point would be as far as Sims 4 and Sims 3. If I just wanted to get it all, I'd assume it's under a collection or bundle. Yeah, and I don't know if it really is relevant to try to have the first game. You can see this is mixed reviewed, this is mixed reviewed, this is mixed reviewed. Yeah. There is, I think, a decent argument. This is mixed reviewed and it's $302. There's a decent argument that Sims 1 and Sims 2 should be public domain at this point and free. Alright. 2K, on the other hand, at least has slightly better selling games. Not. Well, maybe not. Mafia is the only one of those 4 games that's not mixed reviewed. Yeah, they like the old Borderlands 1 and 2. Yeah, that is definitely one of those series that I should just stop playing. I could see myself maybe doing Tiny Tina Wonderlands, but that's mixed reviewed too. Surprisingly, Borderlands 3 is better reviewed. In a funny way, it feels like 2K is starting to have no longer a lineup that speaks to having a good name of quality. Like, if the best thing they can give you is a 2016 release of BioShock Remastered or BioShock the Collection, it's pretty bad. Yeah. I never really thought about it, but it might very well be the case that Randy Pitchford and Borderlands, which noticeably here is in the middle of the screen, is the only thing they can bet on, because 2K seems to not really have anything else in their lineup coming about. Inherently, I imagine they probably shot themselves in the foot, as many big developers have, by not investing in new franchises and only trying to invest in sequels of things that had already happened. Although Risk of Rain might be relatively new. It definitely feels like 2K should have 5 to 10 indie darling type games coming out, or have come out, to potentially prop up some of this. And I'd assume this is Civilization, but I don't even know. We don't have any refurbs for the Steam Deck. Why would we? And let's see the most played games on the Steam Deck. But yeah, I was going for a while there actually playing games on my Steam Deck, but yeah. Any resting time I've spent lately has involved watching just a lot more streaming TV than trying to play Vampire Survivors, for instance, on my Steam Deck, or Balatro. Which, yeah, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So yeah, my Steam Deck has gone back to being mostly a dust collector for the time being, and that's the right thing to do, because I have more important things to focus on. Guess people are playing Fable Anniversary to some extent to hype themselves up for the new Fable game. Yeah. But yeah, I don't feel like I'm seeing any new games on this list. Alright, so last stream there were no Video Games Chronicle articles open at all. And I chalked it up to either a very weird bug with my macros, or that Video Games Chronicle in particular just took the day off or something and had no new news, which definitely is always a possibility. Speaking of no news, yes, I know the Super Bowl happened, didn't watch it, don't follow NFL, don't really have anything to say about it. I doubt there was any video game commercials or advertisements or anything like that. It is perhaps interesting that the biggest form of art has never really tried to advertise during the Super Bowl with their super expensive commercials. But same could really be said for music and movies. More importantly, movies. They're the second biggest form of art by budget, at least. And yeah, so yeah, there is not really any commercial I don't think a video game commercial has ever aired during the Super Bowl. You think maybe a Madden game would, or GTA 6 could, but I just don't think it's actually worth the money to run those kinds of commercials. I did sit through the halftime Super Bowl and watch that online as far as the halftime show. surprisingly long. It felt like 10 minutes with really just one singer and an occasional 2 other guest singers popping up. All in Spanish, so I didn't know what was being said, and it definitely sounded like a fairly traditional Spanish style song of the type I've heard before. Surprisingly, a rather low amount of fireworks, and really a kind of a low amount of flash compared to some of the shows I've seen before, where you just have fireworks going off all over the place, and it would be fairly high energy, or really more than high energy, hyper energy. So yeah, it was a interesting stage design and filmography and the whole thing too. It definitely didn't feel like a stage show. It felt like you were in the middle of a actual music video. I don't listen to music or follow music these days. Never really did, actually, in my whole life. But yeah, my general thought is I don't hear people talking about music anywhere as much as they once did 10, 20 years ago. It's become less of a thing. And again, video game music is very different than any other kind of music, so there almost certainly would never be like big video game music playing in the middle of a Super Bowl. It would be weird, I suppose, if something like that did happen. Interesting, but yeah, unlikely to happen. So yeah, that's something I really can't connect to video games. So let's move on to the Video Games Chronicle articles. Let's see. Fallout 76 devs are looking into adding crossplay, but say there are huge technical hurdles. If it doesn't happen, it won't. If it does happen, it won't happen anytime soon, Bethesda says. Well, I mean, they could chisel that above their front door. If it does happen, it won't be anytime soon. That's true for everything they do. And there is not really a lot of justification for there not to be crossplay. Not in my mind. First of all, this game's not that old, so the concept of crossplay should have been well known to them on day one when they first started writing their code. Second of all, this is an online MMO game, so the vast majority of everything being done is being done through servers. So yeah, there really is no justification for crossplay not existing. Fallout 76 being an MMO type game, though, is also something that me as a critic could never really waste my time on, because whatever experience I have is going to be different from every other person's experience, and any experience I have today is going to be different from any experience I have tomorrow. There is no artistically created content, or at least not a significant amount of it, that you would see past the tutorial, that every player would see past the tutorial. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Oh, I guess we do have some video game commercials, so I shot my mouth off. A Pokemon aired a Super Bowl ad featuring Lady Gaga, Lamine, or Lamine maybe, Yamal, Jizo, and Trevor Noah, and more. Yeah. Me being unable to pronounce most of these names indicates how little I know about it. Each celebrity describes their favorite Pokemon and appears alongside him. Okay, Pokemon, I guess, as a franchise is the biggest game series. So they would be one to do commercials like that. I think that's Trevor Noah. But I don't think Trevor Noah is a singer. Maybe he is. Right. So that might be a video worth watching, but if I watch it now, I'll just get content ID'd. So maybe I'll check that out later from my own personal information. The Rayman creator says there's kind of a remake of the original game planned. Michelle Ansell's comments follows the listing of a 30th anniversary edition on a rating site. I don't know if you really should trust him, though. But, yeah. Remake of an old game. Probably would get people's attention, but really, some of these game series like Rayman are hitting a 30th anniversary, but that doesn't mean they were actually successful series. I wouldn't really consider Rayman to be that successful of a series. They're just getting older. And certainly, I would think Rayman, if it was going to go anywhere, would need to be rebooted as something fairly different, just sticking to some core concepts of what Rayman was, which, as far as I know, looking at this one screenshot, it looks like it was just a platformer game. And this was PS1, Saturn, Jaguar, and PC, and look how zoomed in the camera is for this game. This is, I'm pretty sure, a Ubisoft title, so the odds of a Ubisoft game coming out at all is pretty low these days. Let's see, France gives 28 clair-obscur developers a knighthood and says video games have reached a new level of recognition. Sandfall Interactive members made Knights of the Order of Arts and Letters. Okay. That is interesting. I just watched a video that tries to understand and explain the economics of different countries, and they did an update on France, and according to that YouTube channel, France is not doing particularly well in their economics, which would explain a lot of Ubisoft's problems, in that they have a almost as much, if not more, debt as Greece did before Greece's economy collapsed recently, relatively recently, and they have a lot of problems in that younger people who are working in the country are working on temporary contracts that don't get them guaranteed work protections and healthcare and things like that, whereas the older people are on permanent contracts, which makes them practically impossible to be fired. But then the older people are retiring, and there's only like 1.4 people in France paying into taxes to support the equivalent of Social Security for the retired people in France. And so, yeah, they need to do austerity measures to try and fix that, but austerity measures are never popular, and the French revolt if you even mention it. Well, I suppose they don't actually revolt as much as they just protest and imply they might revolt. And apparently France has had like 5 prime ministers in a very short time because of it. So yeah, there's perhaps a reason why we don't see more video game companies in France, or more video game companies popping up in France. Amongst other European Union countries in comparison. Moving on, Hamster reveals a full console archives games lineup, including Tecmo and Hudson Classics. The first 2 console classic games, Cool Borders and Ninja Gaiden 2, are out now on Switch. Which, boy, look at how low polygon that is. I definitely remember Cool Borders as a name. In fact, a lot of these I recognize the names of. I'm not sure I would inherently recognize the visuals of them. Not sure I played any of them. Let's see. Amazon Prime's 10 quote free games for February include Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and Total War Attila. At this point, I've stopped looking at all the Amazon Prime free games and the Epic Games Store free games. They are below 0 as far as their value to me by just being on different services. Yeah, and I don't know if there's really anything more to say about that. So I'll move on. Let's see. Epic Games Store boss says it plans to be on the next Xbox console on day 1. It's believed that the next Xbox could be a console/PC hybrid with multiple game stores. Yeah. I seriously doubt the Epic Games Store is going to have the same place of pride as the Microsoft solution, where all the money goes to Microsoft. But who knows? Microsoft may determine that they actually would make more money if they just had the Epic Games Store as the default store, and they just got some kind of flat fee from it. That might work better. Frankly, I wouldn't be 100% surprised if instead of a new Xbox there was some kind of new console that was designed by Microsoft but called the Epic console or the Fortnite console or something like that. Or the Epic X instead. And Microsoft just handled the background stuff, the servers, and put their games on what would be more advertised as a Epic Games console/PC hybrid. It's kind of pointless to talk about any of these things though, because if these things come out, they're going to be very expensive and adoption is going to be very low. I suspect that is going to be the case with the Steam machine too, but I imagine the Steam machine will still do better than most. But yeah, I think we're just going to see very slow hardware sales for a while now. Apparently Video Games Chronicle is doing a live event in Glasgow. If you want to go see that, that's a commercial, not actual video game news. Disney Dreamlight Valley is finally getting a free Switch 2 upgrade next month. Switch 2 players get improved visuals and a higher item limit. It's interesting that there would be any kind of item limit at all. That seems kind of like ridiculous. The higher item limit is 6,000 items, up from 3,000. That seems like an arbitrary number, but who knows, each item might take up a megabyte or two, and so it might be moving on. I don't think I finished a sentence there. Namco's latest major arcade Ridge Racer game, Rave Racer, is getting a home version for the first time. That was the last one they ever made, and when did it get made? Would be the question. Rave Racer was released in 1995. Yeah. It was always the case that the arcade machines had more expensive hardware in them, so they could do more exciting visuals for their time. Of course, nowadays, I would say this level of polygons is not very exciting at all, but back in the day, this would have been seen as a considerable improvement from what you had at home. Plus, most of these racing games had steering wheels, if not full-on seats and throttles and pedals attached to them, so you had a lot of accessories to make a more realistic experience. Some of them had rumbles in the seat and force feedback too. Switch 2 is getting an eFootball spin-off this summer called eFootball Kickoff. Okay. Seems kind of ridiculous that you would need a spin-off of a soccer game. You couldn't get an entire soccer game into a Switch version. A lot of this news, I imagine, is just going to be recapping stuff we talked about in the last stream from Gamatsu, like Konami releasing a 13-game Goemon collection for Switch and PS5 and PC. Which, yeah. I wish there were more people willing to go and look at these older games and learn something new, but I don't think it's particularly too jaded to assume that most gamers will not, that they won't even hear about these games, let alone give them any chance. Same is true for movies, and honestly, I think it's even worse for movies where people are not willing to go back and watch older movies. I heard, I saw a post a few weeks ago saying that the film classes, film appreciation classes, were struggling because they could not get the audience to put their phones down and pay attention and sit through a 2-hour movie. And they could not get people to have any kind of common ground on any movies they had all seen. So if you wanted to have an open discussion and say, who's all seen Gone with the Wind? Nobody in the audience would have, in the class, would have seen Gone with the Wind except for the professor. You could probably get them all to talk about Disney movies and Marvel movies, and that's about all the touchstones, cultural touchstones that exist amongst newer generations of moviegoers. And yeah, being a fan of the movies these days isn't anywhere as much work, and yet it's also not something people really strive to do, where there were real cinephiles in the old days who would go out of their way and jump through a lot of hoops to make sure they'd seen certain movies. Moving on, PlayStation and Guerrilla Games announced a tactical co-op Horizon game called Horizon Hunters Gathering, which, yeah, this was the one that very oddly looked just completely different animation style from the other Horizon games, to the point when I first looked at it I didn't even really recognize that it was in that same Horizon universe. You can even see with the creatures that they are a little bit more shiny, a little bit more anime in their color palettes. Yeah. Yeah, you can see the first human looks very different. And even, I hadn't seen this trailer, even that character there, who's the main protagonist of the Ryzen series, looks completely different than the way she does in the actual Ryzen games. But then yeah, you see this level of motion and the lightning and animations all happening. And yeah, this trailer is showing entirely different characters from what I saw in screenshots before. And I don't know where you get ninja characters from, and I don't know where you get brightly different colored hair highlights from in the Horizon universe. It definitely felt like this was potentially just some other game that they quickly changed to make it be a Horizon game. It'd be interesting if this is an intentional pivot, not just for this game, but for the entire Horizon series. That it is just going to be more team-based dumb fun and less big-time story. But it is also interesting that it said it was a 3 game. Up to 3 players team up as hunters to protect the world. Yeah, and yet they showed like 5 characters there, maybe 6. Moving on, the Super Bomberman collection has been announced for Switch and Switch 2. It's available today. Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition on Switch 2 is available later this month. I believe I heard DF Retro talking about this port, and they were saying that it I think was particularly bad. But I could be wrong about that. But yeah, for as old as this game is, which it says it's Anniversary Edition, but that I believe means really, is Fallout 4 10 years old? Can't be. Really? Wow. 10 years. I don't know how that is possibly true, but according to this, Fallout 4 is 10 years old. I would be more willing to believe that Fallout as a series is 10 years old, and that would be crazy to believe. But yeah, I guess for a 10-year-old game, the visuals here don't look too bad, but boy, that really just drives the nail in as far as how far back I am. I remember one of my fans gifting me Fallout 4 and me never getting around to playing it and feeling bad about that. I've felt bad about it off and on apparently for 10 years and still haven't gotten around to playing the game. Which is why I stopped asking people to gift me games as a way of supporting me. Let's see. Just 2 weeks after Final Fantasy VII Remake came to Switch 2, the now Rebirth has a Switch 2 release date. Work is ongoing on the Switch 2 port of the second chapter of the Square Enix's Remake trilogy. I wouldn't expect the game to, at its core, run particularly differently between the two games. I'd assume they're on the same engine and that the code is almost exactly the same. So that doesn't surprise me. It perhaps shows an indication that Square Enix wants to continue to push Final Fantasy and probably finish the Final Fantasy VII reboots to get as much money as possible, and then we'll have to see if they actually want to reinvest that and remake any of the other Final Fantasy games in the level of quality that Final Fantasy VII got remade. I would assume they might want to do it for Final Fantasy XIII, but I would be surprised if they're just going to try and do that for 8 or 9 games like those that aren't talked about as much. And I definitely don't think they're going to full on try and remake like 1 or 2, because instead they've just remastered and re-released the older games like 1 and 2 a lot already. The PlayStation 5 version of Starfield could be announced soon as Insider shares potential release dates. Okay. Starfield, I don't think would knock the sales up too much coming to the PS5. A game from the team that offended Studio Ghibli's Hayao Miyazaki with its AI zombie animation is out next week. The viral clip from 10 years ago had Hayao Miyazaki call its work an insult to life itself. Miyazaki is an old man. Even 10 years ago he was an old man, so him saying something like that is not particularly unsurprising. I don't remember this famous viral clip. Says Miyazaki says the animation insults him because it reminds him of his disabled friend and calls the prototype an insult to life itself. That is very harsh, certainly, for a Japanese person to say, but Miyazaki is quite unique. It is crazy, though. It's more crazy it took him 10 years to go from that point to actually releasing something. And this is the trailer, I guess, we're supposed to be looking at. Okay. I can see that the animation does not look particularly exciting. It's generic shapes. Yeah. Even 10 years ago, this would have not been something that I would have sung the praises of visually. Yeah, it seems like this feels a lot like a God game or a life simulation game. Yeah. That is, yeah, not interesting to me. I wouldn't have put it as harshly as Ghibli did. Now, this says it's a creature that looks like a zombie, so I didn't even really see anything that looked like a zombie there. And it's just using machine learning, which is stupid. Certainly to try and use AI to animate things instead of using artistic people, humans that understand how human and creatures in general move. Yeah. Is this really news though? That a game is coming out from the same people who made an AI zombie animation 10 years ago. Like, that is the most surprising thing about this is that the company is still around 10 years later, really. Seemingly they haven't done anything in between then, and I really don't think this falls under the realm of video game news, really. This is definitely much more of the type of game that I would just ignore when I look through all the new games that come out on Steam. I definitely wouldn't make an article about them. Let's see, this video, it's not linked correctly. The Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, here's where to watch today's big presentation. I would assume that this presentation has already happened, and I would assume we may get more news about it next stream on Wednesday. Switch 2 release dates for Indiana Jones and Fallout 4 leak online ahead of today's Nintendo Direct. Yeah. It certainly says something about how weak the Switch 2 hardware is, if it is a case that a 10-year-old game like Fallout 4 can't run well on it. Which is what I think I heard. Again, maybe I misheard and I'm wrong about that. But it is kind of believable too that the hardware in a Switch 2 really can't handle even 10-year-old poorly programmed software. I think Fallout 4 is Unreal Engine, though. So this isn't going to be one of those cases where we blame Bethesda's Gamebryo engine. It's more just a case where we might blame Bethesda's lack of optimization and ability to program well in general. Because I'd say probably the majority of games on the Switch 2 are running on the Unreal Engine and run as well as they are going to run. A Japanese rhythm game called Felicity's Door has arrived on Apple Arcade. The game focuses on flow, touch, comfort, and audio-visual harmony. Interesting descriptions. Do you play it with a cell phone? Yeah. I would assume you're tapping on a cell phone to play it. Yeah. It's amazing how many of these like rhythm games are what people are looking for when they want that casual party experience, and how many of the different of these rhythm games have been made and because of it. Let's see. Valve claims Steam Machine testing shows, quote, the majority of games run at 4K 60 with FSR. The big caveat there is with FSR. Valve has yet to announce the release date or price information for the Steam Deck. I saw a podcast and they were speculating that it would be around $800 to start with the Steam Machine, and that would be too expensive. I frankly think it's at this point pointless to even speculate, but yeah, $800 could be the price, and I don't know if that's really going to be too expensive because you may just not have any other option. I think there's a decent chance the Steam Machine is going to be a paper launch where the richest of the rich people are going to actually be able to get it, and then inventory is going to be low, and it'll be maybe Christmas or even 2 Christmases from now before the Steam Machine starts to see some kind of sales and more inventory and availability. Yeah. I personally, even though I do have 4K TVs, am just not in the market to want to play something at 4K 60. I just don't really see a big enough improvement to go through all that hassle. I would rather stick to 1080p 60 and not have FSR on and generate fake frames and just have a smooth experience overall. My fear, though, is that eventually it is just going to be mandatory in these fake frame generation systems, whether it's FSR or something else for NVIDIA or Intel, is just going to be locked on and there won't be a way to turn it off. It'll just be mandatory. And yeah, if we get to that point, people are going to be upset about that. Let's see. Sony says Ghost of Yoti sales are outperforming Tsushima. The PlayStation 5 sequel significantly contributed to Sony's most recent financial results. I guess good for them. Haven't seen a lot of advertisement for it, so that is also surprising that the sales are doing so well. Although it's not like there's a lot of competition as far as other PS5 games to buy. Let's see. There's an analysis that the PS5 outsold the Switch 2 during stronger than expected holiday sales season for Sony. Is this speaking worldwide or is this speaking specifically to the UK? Because that's important information, because I can definitely tell you PlayStation 5 did not outsell the Switch 2 in Japan. Seems to imply it's US sales in particular, which sure, that is believable that in the US that happened. Yeah, I saw an article that said that the anime industry for the first time has more sales outside of Japan than they do inside. Maybe not. Maybe it was an anime industry. Maybe it was the manga industry. No, I'm pretty sure it was the anime industry. But yeah, that is interesting. But I also think that the majority of people working in the Japanese anime industry are very committed and frankly outspoken about how they are not planning on kowtowing to foreigners, and so they're going to keep making what they're making as best as they can, regardless of who buys it, which might be another great example of the artists getting their way more often than they normally would. Valve confirms that the Steam machine price and release dates have been delayed by exploding component prices. They're still planned for the first half of the year, but I could see that also getting pushed back to Black Friday and Christmas. I don't think they would want to push it back past December 31st, but I could see them being a private company doing anything. They can basically do whatever they want. They don't have to answer the shareholders at all. Yeah, speaking, since I was talking about the anime industry, it definitely was the case when I was first in the anime that the general public was not ready to even know it existed, let alone shouldn't watch it. And even years later, I really question if the general public should watch anime. And well, for the most part too, the anime that people would see is going to be just like Dragon Ball, the biggest, most what's the word? I want to say family friendly, but friendly to the general populace animes. Whereas if you start to really delve deep into the things, the animes that have been made, a lot of it is just not going to be either palatable or digestible to the general public. Yeah. So, yeah, I just don't think the general public of the West in particular is ready and may never be ready for the levels of extremes that many animes, particularly animes of the old days, went to, because they were really pushing the envelope and being very edgelordy, whereas censorship in general has increased a lot, and what gets shown has decreased a lot. Right, back to video game news. We're almost done with Video Games Chronicles, but we do have a lot of news here. A lot of this is fairly old. Overwatch is dropping the 2 and adding 10 new heroes, and coming to Switch 2 in a major revamp. That is interesting that they are adding 10 new heroes, and I didn't hear any of that in the announcements. Although, in fairness, adding 10 new heroes may be not that exciting to the original Overwatch fans or people who are still playing Overwatch, because I think they may just want the old heroes back, or more focus on the old heroes. Honestly, it is a little surprising that Overwatch wasn't just adding a new hero every couple of months and shifting up the balance and changing it every couple of months. You would think that would be how you would do that, instead of announcing 10 heroes all at once. Even if you do release them slowly, which I'm not really seeing any evidence that will happen. Yeah, and I guess that was one of the Blizzard announcements. Apparently, Blizzard said they were going to make all kinds of announcements about everything, and none of the announcements seem to have been that important, because they're not really getting even reported on. The Convergence Games Showcase announces its games lineup for February 19th event. Let's see. Several games apparently are going to be shown off at this event. I don't recognize this event, though. Indie Games Event Convergence Games Showcase. 30 indie games and AA games. So this sounds like, to me, like this would be the place. If you're making an indie game, you would want your game to be shown off. That this is the level, if you can get in a showcase like this, where you're getting a really good amount of coverage versus the people who just pay $100 to put their game on Steam and then don't even bother to put a press release out about it. Pokemon will debut a special video during the Super Bowl celebration celebrating its 30th anniversary. Well, I guess if I had seen this article, I would have known that they were going to make a special video. I assume in that special video they did not tease or announce anything new as far as the Pokemon series is concerned. And then the Nintendo president, and Nintendo of Japan president, says increasing memory cost won't affect the Switch 2 price for now, but if it continues, it will be reevaluated. Which is a long way of saying we have nothing to announce at this time. That brings us to the Gamatsu articles. So let's go through these. Utawaro Mono Zon 2 for PC launches February 25th. Let's see, this is already on the fall list, but it weirdly doesn't have a check mark. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai. The Hinokami Chronicles 2 DLC character Tanjiro Kamado Infinity Castle launches February 13th. It seemed like for a brief time there they were slowing down announcements around Demon Slayer things, but DLC characters, but maybe they're ramping up. You can see that the game is rated very positively overall, and I would assume it is a character versus character fighting game, but it kind of doesn't really look like that. I'd like to see this actually in movement. Interestingly, it looks more like a Warriors game in parts and a boss fighting game in parts. And yeah, I would assume that you really need to know the anime story to really appreciate this. It definitely has a feeling of maybe the next Naruto type anime, which I guess might be damning it with faint praise, because in reality the Naruto anime in particular was never particularly that good. As a great example of something that really is more of a mainstream series, at least the first Naruto show was, versus other ninja shows that predated it. Yeah. Let's see. A game called Colorbound launches in 2026 for all consoles and PC. Guess that's all I have to say about that. Chronal Hearts adds a PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch 2 versions. Okay. Here's Colorbound's Steam page. Yeah. I think this is one of those games where you have to select a certain color and you can only interact with certain colors, and you'll fall through the floor if you select the wrong colors, potentially. Would be my guess. And Chronal Hearts doesn't look particularly too impressive so far. So I almost don't want to put it on the fall list, but I will. This week's Japanese game releases: Yakuza Kiwami 3 and Dark Ties, Mario Tennis Fever, and more. Yeah, I guess if you name something forever, the assumption is you would not make any more of that game series, which is something you really would never want to actually commit to. Fear Effect Retro Helix for PS4 and 5, Switch, and PC launches February 27th. Hannah and Rain aren't done yet. This Fear Effect 2 first launched in 2001 for the PlayStation. This is the first time it's been ported to new platforms. Yeah, that definitely didn't look like a new game just based on the art style. You just don't see this art style these days, unfortunately. I wish a lot of the older art styles stayed around just for the variety of the visuals. But yeah, you can see that the thumbnail here and the screenshots may be fairly different. Yeah, we may just be getting to the point now where PlayStation 1 games are the next on the laundry list of games that can be ported and that will be ported to PC. Emulation of PlayStation 1 games probably has been perfect for a long time now, but the ability to do it better with earlier games has probably been what people have been focused on. And at some point, I would imagine all the games that will be remade and then that'll be that. The idea of remastering a remake or remastering a remaster in particular is just going to sound kind of silly. It's interesting here on Reanimal that they've got the last week of pre-order stamp on it, which again, I thought Valve didn't want that kind of advertising in the thumbnails in particular. Let's see, Console Archive's initial lineup has been announced. You're seeing several Japanese titles here. I guess they translated them. Ninja Gaiden 2, Cool Borders, Doraemon. Yep. You've seen this list before. And that's it for Gamatsu. There really wasn't that much news from them today, which isn't super surprising since it is a Monday. That'll bring us to gaming on Linux. Mesa 25.3.5 arrives with bug fixes from open source Linux graphics drivers. But yeah, nice improvements overall. I am still somewhat, maybe even growingly more concerned about whenever I do build my computer, whether Bazzite Linux will actually let me easily use OBS to record with all the plugins, because it seems like the Flatpak version of OBS is a little bit of a hassle as far as plugins go, and the non-Flatpak versions of OBS, if some exist, are a bit of a hassle as far as getting them to run and work. So there seems like there's just not a great system there. And I do vaguely recall, I think OBS was trying to create a whole different type of plugin system that maybe would have more compatibility with the sandboxing that happens for Flatpaks. If that works, that would be great, certainly. I know they added Flatpak, plugin version check and plugin updaters to make sure the plugins you have installed are up to date with the newest version of OBS you have installed. Moving on, the Vulkan-based translation layer D7VK officially expands to include Direct3D 5 support. So, even more games, one would assume, are going to run, although these would be fairly old games. Carmageddon 2, Tomb Raider 2, Mortal Kombat 4, Nightmare Creatures, Nice 2, Mobile 1, Rally Championship, Death Trap, Dungeon, Lands of the Lore 3. Steam game People Playground hit by malware via the Steam Workshop. It's interesting that the Steam Workshop would allow you to potentially have malware in it, but I imagine I don't think Valve looks at this stuff before it gets posted enough. Let's see. To put it simply, a mod was uploaded for FPS++, which turned out to be a warm malware. Here's a list of everything the mod does. It silently votes and favorites the mod, which I think mods manipulating their voting system is unfortunately too common. It scans every workshop item you've published, edits them all silently, re-uploads content, changes descriptions. 1 in 2 chance to add optimized to the new mod's description, adds tags, upvotes, and favorites all of those items. It creates and uploads a brand new public workshop item under your account and copies the mod's files, title, thumbnail, and description into it, upvotes and favorites the new item too. It resets your Steam stats for the game, such as achievements. Your playtime is untouched. It also deletes configs, control scheme stats, caches, maps, contraptions, and prefs. It wipes mod JSON files and empty mod folders. It disables every other mod except itself and one hard-coded name. Makes the first-person shooter cap 10,000 and disables shady code protection. It makes it look like the mod is working by multiplying the frames per second counter, LMAO. Everything except achievements are completely gone and unrecoverable after you've been infected. If you want your achievements back, you can use third-party tools that I will not link in order to spoof the game into thinking you had the achievements you previously had. Although this is technically cheating, so is your achievements being deleted after someone decides to delete them all. So yeah, it doesn't seem to me like it's doing anything outside of Steam, and so it is a very custom worm, effectively working within the constraints of the Steam infrastructure, whereas a more traditional worm would infect your whole computer and probably try to steal credit card info and stuff like that, and then try to spread via open network ports in your local area network and through the internet to other computers that it could automatically install itself to. Which, yeah, doesn't seem like this automatically installs itself to anyone, and so it requires people to be tricked into installing it in the first place. It does bring about an interesting question as to whether workshop software should be approved by the original creator of the game, which would put a lot of extra work on the shoulders of the original creator of the game, and I imagine most people would opt out of anything like that, but it would be interesting to say the least if that was what it did. Let's see, some of this stuff seems like Valve and the Steam client should stop it. Like, pretty much all this stuff should be caught and stopped in particular, but particularly being able to delete configs and reset your achievements so you lose all your achievements seems like something that should not be allowed to happen at all on the client side of the Steam client. It really highlights that a lot of this stuff should probably be only achievable through APIs and sending commands directly to a server that Valve is running, where the settings and files are in the cloud more. Let's see. Steam Early Access games can now have a planned release date listed. Answering calls from developers, Valve has tweaked the Early Access game pages to allow devs to add a full release date, just like the Coming Soon pages can list an exact date or period where it may release. Early Access games can now do that too. That's interesting that that wasn't just the default. And they're seeing that more as part of their effort to push the Steam personal calendar. Which, yeah, maybe next major sell we'll see the Steam personal calendar just make it directly to the front page, or at least a link to it, as a new way of advertising games that are coming. Wine 11.2 has been released with optimizations in PDB, loading, support for MSVC constructors too. I don't know what either one of those are, though. Let's see. Microsoft Visual C is probably what this is. Constructors in C runtime. I don't know what P database would be, though. They noted fixes for the likes of Black Mirror 2017, King of the Dragon Pass, Future Mark 3D, Mark Vantage, Night of the Rabbit, Hong Kong Massacre, Salmon Max. Mostly it's like point and click type games, it feels like. Well, not all of them though. It really is just getting into the weeds and showing how often it is just a small handful of games that will be using a technology in a certain way, or using a technology at all, and yet Wine's compatibility layer just needs to try and accommodate all games if possible to make sure everything is playable. Let's see. The Beaver City building game Timberborn confirms a launch of March 5th. I looked up that in the last stream. Yeah. You can see it's rated overwhelmingly positive. But honestly, I just don't think I'd ever want to play another city simulator. Even a slightly silly city simulator like Timberborn. Let's see. Butcher by day, People Hunter by night. Zomb Butcher. Sounds like a fun but gruesome sim. Let's watch this trailer. So, the first gameplay mechanic seems to be a butchering minigame. And then the main gameplay mechanic almost certainly is running around and attacking and fighting people. Then it also seems like there is a shop simulator aspect going on here too. And this obviously is going to come from the, what is that play? The Demon Barber play. Forget the name of that. But no real reference to it. Yeah, that doesn't really look like much of a game, honestly, if I'm gonna point it out. It feels like a gimmick game that is probably a little bit of streamer bait, and you'll see a few streamers play it for a while, and then that may get it a big enough audience to get it to actually sell and be played, but yeah, I imagine there isn't more than a couple of hours of entertainment in this concept. And to my mind, I would say the idea of food and zombies don't really mix too well together, because the general assumption is zombies cannot eat anything other than brains, so them being a butcher and butchering meat and during the day just seems like fairly disconnected from what you would expect a zombie to be doing. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Chromagun 2, Die Hard. It's on the follow list. Coming out February 12th. Don't believe I've played Chromagun 1. Let me see if that is true. Chromagun 1. Nope. This is from 2016, 10 years ago. And it looks a little simplistic. I did put it on my wish list, but yeah. Never did get around to actually buying it. It's been as cheap as $2.59, and even at that, that feels like that would have been a little more expensive than what I'd like to spend. So it may very well be the case that we are now just getting a lot of sequels and remakes, as funding to do those is probably less than the funding to make a full-on brand new game or a AAA game of any quality. So we're seeing smaller games get sequels and remakes too. Safe in Our World has a big charity bundle up on Fanatical for some great picks. Let's see, several games listed here. Not a ton of them are very recognizable though. Yeah, and I'm wondering how many of these word puzzle Scrabble type games with Balatro elements are going to pop up and actually be successful. Whether we're going to see a lot of those go for a while, or if it's just going to be a small flash in the pan. That brings us to GameDeveloper.com. Nintendo's president says long-term memory shortage may put pressure on profitability. That is a crazy way to phrase that. This game is almost out. Us2 Games makes layoffs to facilitate its PC first pivot. That might be one of the most fair reasons to have layoffs yet, when you're actively changing how your business is going to develop games. Laying off people who are not talented or qualified to make PC versions of games almost does make sense. Although there is an argument that you should just stick to those employees and educate them on how to make PC games instead of laying them off. Yeah. It's not like I think the game developers at Us2 aren't capable of learning how to make PC versions. It's frankly not that different in the programming aspects. It's more different in the concept and just making something horizontal instead of vertical. Alright, well that's going to bring us to all the new games on Steam. We're going through this, I think, fairly quickly today. So if I put something on the follow list, that means I'm really interested. If I swipe to the right, that means I'm leaving it open to make a YouTube short on it, theoretically. And if I'm swiping down, I am closing the tab completely. Speaking of YouTube, my last stream averaged 14 minutes of watch time, which it was like a 3-hour stream, so that's still not amazingly great, but it is averages we're talking about, so really it is the best watch time I've had ever, or at least in a very long time as far as I can remember. So I can only hope that is the beginning of a snowball effect, because if it is, that would be great. Yeah. It really is the case that most YouTube content creators are just one small bit of success to get into the YouTube partner program, and then that's where the real struggle begins to stay successful or grow your success, if that's what you're really going for. I'm not sure. Pretty sure that's not what I'm going for at this point. I do want to be monetized, but I don't want to be PewDiePie level of success. Yeah. There's a lot of selling out. There's a lot of jumping through hoops. There's a lot of chasing of trends that you have to do to stay successful on YouTube, and I'm not sure any of them, the successes on YouTube, are really covering video games in the way I do and want to. Let's see. Some kind of card game there. Give that a chance. So far today, it looks like we've seen a decent amount of games. It does weirdly feel like we're getting better quality games, slightly more better quality of games. Yeah, I suppose it's better to say we're seeing more games that are above a certain level of quality than to say that overall, on average, games are getting better. There's still a lot of really garbage games. At a certain level, that's a little bit scary too, because that means it's just going to get harder and harder to go through all of these games. A lot of that is AI and asset flipping, which, yeah, I would say this definitely looks like a low effort asset flip. If it even is a game, it might have been actually a virtual puppet system. But yeah, I have given thought in the past to doing a virtual puppet VTuber type thing just in the corner of my videos, just to look like other people's videos that have face cam. And yeah, I would be interested to see people putting comments as to whether they think that would improve anything. I kind of don't think it would. It is really just also ran Me Too type experience. So I assume that's a desktop pet. This is interesting that this game has a slot machine on every screenshot. Is this just like an infinite runner? Yeah, I suspect that's not really much of a game. Particularly in the vertical videos, I don't know how you squeeze a face cam in without it, or a fake face cam in my part, because yeah, I'm not gonna really use my real face. Yeah, you could take up a big chunk at the top or bottom, doing something like that. But don't really think I'd like to do that. Sorry, I keep yawning. Yeah. I'm still also not really in a perfect position where I'm awake during regular times. We have a hidden object for Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, not one that is really done too often. As far as a thought in video games, which I guess you could make Valentine's type games, but then nobody would want to really play them or buy them throughout the rest of the year. That would be my assumption. Is this AI? Doesn't say it is. There's something intriguing on this. Enough to want me to give it a chance. Yeah. I guess ironically, the closest thing to a Valentine's Day game, and you'll take notice that there is no sale to highlight these types of games, would be a lewd or a full-on adult game on Steam or some other platform. Yeah. The on-rails shooter games where you're shooting hearts out at the anime girls. I forget I want to say it's called Doki Doki Panic. Yeah, I think that's the name of the series of games. Yeah, that would be about the closest one. Or Escape from Yandere. Yeah, as far as love gone wrong. Which I think that's what yandere means, is yan in Japanese is like one of the forms of saying love, and dere is like crazy when combined with that. Which I guess that would sell year round at least, as far as Valentine's Day romance going wrong. But it is interesting that we don't have even like low effort asset flip games where you have little cupids flying around shooting arrows into people's hearts. Like that would be pretty easy to do, to make. Maybe a shoot 'em up would be even easier in that style, instead of maybe doing it like a 3D shooter. And yeah, we still get a shockingly large amount of horror games anytime throughout the year. Perfume Atelier. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen a game where you make perfumes. In a lot of ways, it looks like it's a lot of mini games to mix chemicals. But it does put a different spin on it, certainly. Yeah. Of course, the lack of Valentine's Day games is further exacerbated because of the lack of romance in regular games. Like, I don't even know if in the Indiana Jones game, I don't think this is anything, but I'm gonna give it a chance anyways. Yeah, I don't even know if there is a female love interest in the Indiana Jones video game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which, if there isn't, that is kind of shocking, because it's pretty much always been the case that there's some kind of female love interest in every Indiana Jones movie. Here we have an adult game that should be in the adult section. This one doesn't support English. Korean game. Interesting art style and user interface. Yeah, some of these like live action games, I guess, are increasingly going to be the new thing as far as dating sims. And at a certain level, I think every game should potentially have a little bit of romance, even if it's just like puppy love or something. Like, just makes for more opportunities to tell different stories. It opens up the possibility of a brighter story. It says puppets cutting off each other's hands, playing some kind of poker. That is weird. Although not that weird. Sudoku Dungeon. I really don't want to get into playing a new Sudoku game pretty much ever for as much time as they took, but I wouldn't really hate something that's faster somehow in a variant of Sudoku. Interesting that Valve would allow you to have that word as in your title, even though I know there is a card game by that word's name. You'd think that that would be not allowed. Yeah, that is not too hard to scan the titles, or frankly have a human look at all the titles being submitted. It is pretty decent evidence to say that there are definitely games that are not even looked at by Valve that are showing up on Steam. Not looked at enough, or not looked at anon at all. That's what I meant to say. I guess at a certain level, it is worth pointing out that we have stopped seeing damsels in distress in games very often. Like, I can't really think of the last time I have seen a damsel in distress. But unfortunately, the push to not just have damsels in distress and have them be the goal, the trophy they collect at the end of the game, has almost certainly increased the, well, decreased, actually, I guess that's the right word to say, the number of female characters in games overall, or female secondary characters in particular. Carmageddon Road Shift is already 53% positive. Must perform very poorly. At the current moment, I've been beaten the last boss 3 times in like 7 runs. Handling the cars is terrible. Hitting a wall is just the end of you. Cars don't turn. Spinning out is the only way to save yourself is to respawn. So yeah, it says the controls are bad. I think that's increasingly an issue with a lot of racing games, and maybe that was always an issue with racing games, is that the controls were pretty bad. And that might be a great example of where the Unreal Engine is probably nowhere as optimized, if this even is an Unreal Engine game. It might be, it might not. But I bet it is nowhere as optimized for car mechanics and car physics as it is for people walking around and running with guns. And yeah, when you try to make a game that's even slightly off of the first-person shooter style, you find the engines are just not really designed for that. You're going to have to make your own code a lot more. And yeah, God help you if you have a wholly original, unique idea of a gameplay mechanic, because then you're going to have to make it all from scratch. Oh, speaking of making things from scratch, this is a nebulous transition to say the least. I saw an article that apparently Capcom scanned the brains of players who are playing a Resident Evil game recently, I would assume, to see if they were actually being made to be afraid. It's probably overkill. It's probably not that hard to do nowadays. Passive MRI, I think is what it's called. It's just like a helmet with a bunch of pieces of metal on it, and they just touch the top of your head and can scan surface level signals to a shocking level of accuracy. But yeah, it's overkill. Years ago, I speculated you could do the exact same thing if you just had metrics that were timing how long a player was looking at one texture in a game versus looking at another. That if you had like bleeding walls and the player turned away to not look at the bleeding walls and instead looked in a different direction, then you know they're scared, disgusted, or bored by the bleeding walls, so you maybe use those textures a little bit more. And my speculation as far as a concept is that you would have entire palette swaps of textures that would sometimes randomly appear, but more often than not just customize themselves to make the game scarier, if that's really your goal. Honestly, I don't think it really is the goal of most people making horror games, though, is you don't want to actively try and terrify them so that they're afraid to go forward towards the credits. And particularly in the case of Resident Evil, they're not really trying to scare anybody, I don't think, in those action horror games. Like, I've never heard of anybody saying, oh, I got to this one boss in Resident Evil and then I was too scared so I stopped playing, which is, yeah, really a failure in the development of a game, not something you would want to go for. So maybe they were scanning the brains to make sure it wasn't too scary. The ESRB in particular in the West would probably tell you to censor anything that was too scary anyways, for anything you were going to release on consoles. But yeah, I think you can definitely just, like, if you play a sound effect behind somebody and they ignore it, then you know that sound effect was ineffective. But if you play a sound effect behind somebody and then they immediately turn around to see what's there, then you know you've got them. If you play a sound effect in the distance and they run away from that sound effect, you know you've got them. If they run towards that sound effect, then you know you've caught their attention in a different way. But if they ignore it and walk in a completely different direction, then you know that sound effect is not that helpful. So again, you could have palette swaps of both locations of audio and the types of audio. And finally, I mentioned this theory as far as game development, as far as like an experimental prototype that might be cool to make to someone who was, I want to say insanely, but that's probably a mean way to describe it, but let's go with insanely religious. And so the response to me just talking about how you could make a horror game more scary was something along the lines of the devil works through many people or something. Yeah, like, which, yeah, if you're calling horror video games the devil's work, you're pretty extreme at that point in your religiosity. Here we have a Russian, Ukrainian, Chinese visual novel, which is probably nothing. Yeah. Which I guess that kind of gets back to the thought that there's, I wouldn't say the general public shouldn't play video games, but there definitely is a small subsect of the general public that just cannot distinguish fantasy from reality, and as such they probably shouldn't play video games. And I'm not just talking crazy people, I'm talking people that just could tell the difference between fiction and reality, but refuse to see that there is a difference there at all. Let's see. I've met a couple of people that actually were crazy and honestly shouldn't have been playing video games because of that reason, because they literally couldn't keep it straight in their head as far as what was fiction and what was reality. But yeah, there's a British podcast thing called To Tell the Truth, where they have contestants and they tell a story, and then the other contestants decide whether the story is real or a lie. It's basically the exact same as a TV show called Would I Lie to You, except for the difference there's the lies are very plausible and more scientifically based lies, as far as they are talking about things external to themselves, where Would I Lie to You is comedians telling stories about their own life. They could be truths or lies. Eventually, I personally had to stop listening to Tell the Truth, even though I was enjoying it, because I would later remember the lie that was told and to tell the truth, but not remember that it was a lie. So I was getting these interesting world facts and then realizing, oh wait, that was actually a lie. So, and I definitely don't have time to be getting what effectively was fake information, false information, and then trying to verify it later. I do still watch Would I Lie to You, both the British and the Australian series, and that's fine because, yeah, the stories they're telling are personal to that one person, and I'm never going to remember the stories that are being told or try to repeat them to other people. Romeo is a Dead Man. It comes out February 11th. So it does feel like next week is going to be a fairly big week again for releases. I believe this game actually has been censored, which, I mean, yeah, you look at it and it definitely seems like there could be some content here and there. But yeah. Yeah. Oh, maybe it's not censored, it's just it has costume destruction in it, which is going to show off some skin, so it may just be a lewd game. But yeah. Interesting to see a soccer game come that way, and interesting to see a game again that might be better in the adult section, not in the adult section. Don't know if it really makes anything that big of a deal. Here is one of those puppetry systems that exist out there. I think a lot of these, though, actually probably take a decent amount of GPU performance up too. And yeah, it is also worth saying that the vast majority of these are going to show anime girls, not any male presenting characters. Which, yeah, my voice coming out of an anime girl would be a little bit out there and wild. Wow, there's a lot of screenshots here for Star Sand Island that are not showing the not showing any of the growing, and you have different characters being shown now too. So yeah, maybe the game is expanding as to what it is as it gets closer to release. Killer in. Man, it really is just going to be a deluge of games. Yeah, pretty soon. I don't know why they would want so many games all to release at the same time, but I assume this may just have to do with maybe even taxes, maybe just getting your game out before the end of the first quarter. That may very well be an issue for a lot of games that have publishers, is that the publishers sign these quarterly quarter contracts where the game has to come out at a certain time or there's going to be trouble. I'll do a little bit of fall list cleanup here, but I don't think too much. Yep. This game's Sibling Souls is mostly positive. with 10 user reviews, came out February 7th. It looks like a visual novel. Also looks like it's got AI in it. Yeah, so I don't know why that would be on the follow list. Alright, well, I guess I should be happy that this only took a couple hours to go through the news today. The shorter the better. These do tend to drone on, and I suspect a week from now we will have so many new games coming out that there will be a lot more to say. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching.